Scaling. As the number of players increases, scaling requirements of your game grow. Scaling game development infrastructure can be a challenge, especially for large populations or compute-intensive servers. Operating global deployments adds to the challenge. AWS has several services that can help your solution scale globally. AWS regions are geographically separate clusters of data centers that provide low latency to nearby players. Regions contain availability zones, which are one or more data centers that are isolated from one another for fault tolerance, but within about 60 miles for similar latency. Using multiple AWS regions is essential to providing low latency, stateful game server hosting to players. AWS Outposts are used for hybrid solutions. The AWS Outpost is placed in an on-premises data center or in a co-location data center to extend AWS services into those locations, combining low latency with AWS compatibility. AWS Wavelength deploys AWS services into telecommunication provider networks, such as the edge of 5G networks, enabling single-digit millisecond latencies for games on mobile devices. Amazon CloudFront is a high-speed content delivery network, which may be useful in delivering low-latency static content to players. Edge locations cache CloudFront data for even lower latency. This is not directly useful with game server hosting because game servers are stateful. Default accounts have service limits that limit capacity. Large-scale deployments will often exceed default service limits for an AWS account. The default account limits for network resources are 5 VPCs per region with 200 subnets per VPC. There's a limit of 5 elastic IPs, which are static IP addresses, per region. There is no limit to dynamically assigned public IPs. Some values vary with instance type. For example, the maximum number of elastic network interfaces that can be attached to an instance varies with type. Also, the number of IP addresses that can be associated with each interface varies with instance type. These values are meant to be illustrative and are subject to change. Consult the documentation for current limits. You can request increases to the default account service limits. You can also consider a multiple account game server hosting solution. AWS organizations implement policy-based management across multiple AWS accounts. It enables you to establish multiple accounts, define resource sharing across accounts, and manage billing. AWS Control Tower establishes governance over a multi-account environment. It provides an account factory for provisioning new accounts from blueprints. It also establishes preventative guardrails that stop resources that don't conform to policy from being deployed within an account. And it implements detective guardrails that monitor policy compliance and alert non-compliant behavior to a centralized dashboard. AWS Landing Zone is a multi-account baseline environment that follows AWS best practices, including federated identity management, single sign-on or SSO, and centralized logging with AWS CloudTrail. These services can help you set up and manage a group of AWS accounts to implement a multi-account game hosting solution.